On the NTV program, the tenants of the building recounted the details of what they saw and went through that night.
When the police went down to the basement, they weren't very enthusiastic because it's in a terrible state, and some people use it as a toilet. But when they came back up, the expressions on their faces were very different.
The cops were running all over the building, banging on doors and shouting, "Everybody out, there's a bomb in the building." After what had happened in Moscow and other places, everyone went down into the street in their dressing gowns and slippers.
We've got a 3-year-old. We grabbed him out of the bath, soaking wet. We wrapped him up in a towel, put our heads down and ran.
I got there at 10:15 that evening. I brought all the people who live in the building together and told them, "We've checked the basement and the attics. The building is safe." And I told them, as head of the local FSB, "You can go back to your homes."
This is the first statement by Sergeyev to contradict the facts. The tenants actually spent the whole night in a nearby cinema. The inspection of the buildings was taken so seriously that they couldn't go back to their homes until the following morning.
We weren't allowed back in, and the police stayed in the building until 10 o'clock in the morning. They let us away at 2 o'clock.
I noted down midnight.
We were taken to the October cinema. There was no heating. It was freezing for the children.
Well, I was there with you.
We were all there in the October cinema. There's no point in lying.
Maintaining a false version of events is always difficult. Not long before this clash, General Sergeyev had been telling a completely different story.
I was with you all night. I worked with you until morning. We spoke to each other, and yes, the situation was certainly serious.
On the night itself, the former head of the Ryazan office of the FSB was as certain as anyone else that there had been a bomb in the building.
Sergeyev came over to us several times. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, when the bags had been checked, he got us all together in a circle around him and said, "Today is your second birthday." There were 3 bags of explosive programmed to go off at 5:30. You would have all been there, and you would all have been blown sky high.
From this statement, made on the night by the local head of the FSB, it was clear to all that a real bomb had been defused.
There were 3 bags. The one in the middle had a hole in it. There was an electronic watch inside with wires coming off it. I put my hands in and started gently taking the wires out of the bag.
This photo of the detonator was taken the next day, the 23rd of September. As for the bags, analysis revealed traces of hexogen, an extremely powerful explosive. Acting on the experts' conclusions, on the night of the 23rd of September, the Ryazan public prosecutor ordered criminal proceedings to be instigated in accordance with Article 205 of the Penal Code, terrorism. 1,200 police officers and soldiers were thrown into the hunt for the bombers. Their identikit pictures were pasted all over town and distributed to all police patrols.
There were 2 men, one with a mustache and a woman in a tracksuit. She was sitting in the back.
On the evening of the 23rd of September, Prime Minister Putin announced to the world, "As far as the events in Ryazan are concerned, I don't think they made some kind of cock-up. If these sacks with the explosives were noticed, that means there is at least one plus factor, that the public is reacting in the right way to the events taking place in our country today." In this way, Putin confirmed that a terrorist attack really had been thwarted in Ryazan. The Ryazan telephone exchanges had been put on red alert. The telephonist, Nadezhda Yuknova, intercepted a suspicious call to Moscow. The number that was dialed began with 224, which is the exchange that services the Lubyanka, the FSB headquarters.
They said, "Is the woman with you?" "No, she's taking the trolley bus at noon." "Where's the car?" "The car's in the car park." "Leave Ryazan separately. There are checkpoints and patrols everywhere." And I mean, anyone would have thought, because everyone was thinking about terrorism.
Thanks to that phone call just 24 hours after the discovery of the bomb, the police had already located the suspect's hideout. But then something quite inexplicable happened. On the same day, the 24th of September, two government ministers speaking half an hour apart in the same place made two completely contradictory statements. Vladimir Rashelo, Minister of the Interior, categorically stated that there had been a failed terrorist attack in Ryazan.
Positive measures are already being taken. One example is the prevention of an explosion in an apartment building in Ryazan.
But then Nikolai Patrushev, director of the FSB, immediately contradicted his colleague.
First of all, there wasn't an explosion, and an explosion wasn't prevented. But it wasn't good work. It was an exercise. There were no explosives, just sugar.
The fact that Interior Minister Rushailo apparently knew of no such exercise could suggest that a real bombing had been thwarted. Several months later, during an NTV broadcast, an FSB spokesman stressed the official line. It had been an exercise. But he let slip that it was a joint exercise between the FSB and the local police. The exercise order, he said, had been signed by both ministries.
A major operation involving all the members of the Russian Federation was jointly planned by the police and the FSB. The operation was codenamed Anti-Terror Whirlwind. It was signed by Patrushev and Rushailo.
Even high-ranking Secret Service officers had difficulty supporting the exercise version of events.
I don't get it. Why did it take 2 whole days to tell the world it was an exercise? Frankly, it's incomprehensible.
Well, it's obvious. We wanted to check the logical follow-through of our operation, including the hunt methods for terrorists. That's why we didn't reveal it was an exercise.
Right, but you couldn't have told Rushailo?
Well, you know, things can sometimes get muddled during an exercise. Anyway, during the exercise, we were checking our systems and the systems of the Interior Ministry.
Well, can you believe this? Rushailo says it was a great achievement, and half an hour later, Patrushev says, "Oh no, it was just an exercise."
But Vladimir Putin found himself in an even more awkward position. He had also announced that a bombing had been thwarted. Had the Prime Minister known about the exercises in Ryazan?
The notion that until Patrushev's announcement on the 24th of September, Prime Minister Putin didn't know about any exercise being held in Russia is improbable. If that was the case, Putin would have had to sack Patrushev the moment he heard that the exercise was being held in Ryazan, because it would have meant that Patrushev had not only misled the whole country, but Putin too. Patrushev didn't lose his job. So Putin must have known that Patrushev was holding an exercise in Ryazan on the blowing up of an apartment block.
The members of the Ryazan FSB were not informed about the operation run from Moscow because of the need for secrecy. But they had seen with their own eyes that the detonator and the explosives were genuine. They found themselves in a very tricky situation.
To put it mildly, Sergeyev wasn't pleased. In fact, he was beside himself with rage. After all, in this case, his professional pride as a member of the Special Services had been trampled in the dirt. How could an FSB general not know what was going on in his own patch?
Even worse, now the Moscow bosses were trying to force the local Ryazan FSB to change their game completely. And then, to cover themselves and separate themselves from the actions of the center, the local Secret Service men published an absolutely unique statement.
I would say this document is concrete proof of the involvement of the FSB in the Ryazan attack. I'm going to read these few lines from the Ryazan FSB statement. It has been made known that an imitation detonator, discovered on the 22nd of September, was part of a joint operation. This announcement came as a surprise to us. It came out just as our agents had identified the place where the bombers were living in Ryazan and were preparing to arrest them. It was precisely at this moment that Patrushev replaced the real attack story with the exercise theory.